Well, welcome all. This is a wonderful day here in Chicago. It is sunny as can be, and we are grateful to have you with us to talk about the Leadership and Society Initiative. We are going to go through a 5-part agenda, and we are going to start by welcoming the people that are going to be speaking, hearing about their backgrounds. We're going to give you a snapshot of LSI and the learning journey, talk about the selection, and then most importantly, we're going to leave about 20 minutes for your questions so that we can make sure to get to anything on your minds as you discern whether this should be part of your next chapter. So to welcome you, I want to introduce our speakers. Steve Blewett is an LSI Fellow currently, as is Wendy Dubow. And then Diana and I will introduce ourselves. But Steve, can I start with you? And can you just share a little bit about your background and what brought you to LSI as we kind of lay the table for the rest of the information session?
Sure, and thanks, Seth, for having me on this call, and welcome everyone. So my just a very brief snapshot is I retired in June after a 40-year career in finance at a large global financial institution. And part of the reason I retired at that point in time was that I've had this long-term interest in youth employment, and had both my wife and I have supported different initiatives for youth employment, throughout the last couple of decades. But we really wanted to do something more than just providing financial support. And so had been looking at programs like the LSI program to help actually provide like an off-ramp to the financial career and an on-ramp into the next chapter. I and my wife actually are graduates of the college, and we have great respect and affinity to the university. And so when the LSI program was announced about a year and a half ago, it was I went out and attended the symposium that was held last October, and really knew that at that point this was the program I really wanted to be a part of. And as we can get into later in the discussion, it's just exceeded. I had very high expectations. I have very high expectations for the university, and it's just exceeded all of my expectations at this point. It's just been great.
Thanks so much, Steve. And Wendy, who are you? And what brought you to LSI? Oh, you're on mute, but we are in suspense.
Okay. Let me echo a warm welcome too, and I'm thrilled to be here. It's nice to chat with all of you. So my background crosses the corporate, nonprofit, and consulting arenas, and I've worked at a couple of different think tanks. And the most recent assignment I had was I was with United Way of Metropolitan Chicago for quite a number of years, and was the CEO there for 7 years, stepped down from that role a few years ago, and have been in a phase of kind of like a portfolio approach, doing a lot of different things, kind of trying on different other leadership roles for size. But frankly, trying to really reimagine what I wanted to do in the next chapter and how I wanted to kind of pivot to a different sort of leadership role, still very focused on social impact. And when I had heard about LSI, and I knew Seth from my work at United Way of Metropolitan Chicago, and had a chance to meet Diana, I got really excited about this. And I think for me, it was a way to really think about some structure, some tools, some advisory help, and a group of people to go on this journey with. And I would echo what Steve said. I think that I had very high expectations for the program. When I learned what Seth and Diana were doing, I knew this was going to be super high quality. It's absolutely been what I had hoped it would be to really help me move along. And I think there's something about, I had never been to the University of Chicago, but there was also something about the idea of being at the University of Chicago, embedding all of this at the University of Chicago, and being in that setting to kind of be exposed to a lot of new ideas, people, resources, and sort of all the new pathways that could encourage me to think about. And so that's why I'm part of LSI.
Well, wonderful. We're going to be coming back to Wendy and Steve for their thoughts throughout and then for your questions. I'll introduce myself. I'm Seth Green. I'm the Dean of the Graham School of Continuing Liberal and Professional Studies here at the University of Chicago. This is a university-wide initiative and involves every school and division. Because we are the school that most serves individuals later in life, we are very fortunate to be cast as the operational home. And so we have the joy of having Diana, Sarah Wilson, and Shannon Morrissey, who are the incredible assistant directors on Diana's team, on our broader team at the Graham School. My background, just in brief, is in the intersection of business strategy with some years at McKinsey and social impact. And so this work of figuring out how to really help people who are extraordinary leaders apply that toward impact in society is of tremendous interest to me. And it's been just an incredible universe to be part of as Diana has built it. And so with that, let me introduce you, Diana, and have you share your background and what brought you here. And then we promise to jump into LSI itself. Diana?
Thank you so much, Seth and Steve and Wendy. And it's so wonderful to be with all of you. Thank you for taking the time to join us and learn more about LSI. So I'm Diana Petty. I'm the director of the Leadership and Society Initiative. I have been at the University of Chicago almost 7 years. I come to this role by way of an interdisciplinary research institute on campus called the Mansueto Institute that studies the sustainability of cities. But the lion's share of my career, I actually spent in and around city government in New York. So I worked in the Bloomberg administration for almost a decade, doing civic tech initiatives and public-private partnership building, and then a stint of kind of bespoke, localized, mission-driven consulting, building capacity with human services organizations. But while I was in New York, I was very fortunate to be the beneficiary of several leadership development programs for mission-driven professionals who really wanted to invest in communities and improve quality of life issues around the city. And one in particular that I was involved in for a long time was out of the NYU Wagner School of Public Policy. And I just got really interested in the role that higher education specifically can play in developing leadership talent towards pressing civic needs and societal issues. And so when I came to the University of Chicago, there is a lot going on in that space. There are many wonderful leadership programs for people who want to make the world a better place, but who are emergent, who are sort of at the start of their leadership journey. And so I feel extraordinarily humbled to be able to work and learn from, selfishly, a group of leaders who really are so advanced and bring such incredible experience and expertise and, perspective, having operated at the highest scales, and are translating that really intentionally and systematically towards social issues that they care deeply about. So it's such a wonderful honor to be a part of this, and I'm looking forward to exploring with you all further.
Well, we will be coming back to Wendy, Steve, and Diana, but I will give you the shortest overview before I come back to them for comments on it so that you can just know at the high level what LSI is all about. If you're here, you probably have caught on that LSI supports distinguished leaders in designing meaningful next chapter for themselves and for society. The way that I've sometimes described this in a colloquial sense is that the person who you may know who says, all I want to do is retire and play golf, this program is probably not for them. For the person that says, I'm ready to retire, but I really want to keep waking up every morning and advancing impact. And I am still figuring out exactly what that looks like and how I do that. And I really want a place where I can think deeply about what this next chapter looks like so that I can rewire instead of retire. This is the fellowship for that individual. And we really believe that, especially with the trends I'm about to talk about, there is more opportunity than ever for that person to drive really significant impact in the world. And the University of Chicago wants to be a part of it. So let me just describe the two themes that are behind LSI when we launched it a year ago, as Steve mentioned, with this gathering of 250 leaders from around the world who are thinking about these trends. So the first is, and this is no surprise probably if you're on this meeting, people are living longer. And this is particularly true among the target population for LSI. So with that level of longevity, many people are now saying to themselves, maybe I want to have another chapter of purpose rather than just seeing this world as career and then retirement. So that's trend one. There's a whole new structure of adulthood for a certain group of people where they are able to have that kind of reliability. Part two is that there are very interconnected issues in the world. And as many of you know, that requires leadership. And what we believe is that, especially on these systemic issues, we need more experienced leaders to be able to address the most challenging topics: education, climate change, global peace and security. And what LSI seeks to do, very simply, is it seeks to activate this experienced group of leaders for society. And in the process, we seek two aims: to help those individuals lead more meaningful and fulfilling lives, and most importantly to the university, to harness the power of our ideas and intellectual community to really drive positive impact in the world. So I want to start with the end in mind, and then we'll come to the learning journey. But where LSI ends may be the most descriptive of what it's all about. And where we hope you are at the end of your fellowship year, and I'll turn it over to Steve and Wendy in a moment to talk about where they are in their purpose plan development, is with a purpose plan. Consider it your roadmap for your next chapter. And I'll just share that when we did a lot of focus groups, when we were trying to better understand what are the issues that people at this stage of life are solving for, and where does that meet the assets and pathways of the university, there was a comment from a senior executive who is just about to retire. And she said, I feel like I've had this incredible career, but now I'm in a place where I have all these ideas, but I'm about to lose my identity, my purpose, and my community. And I really want to still know exactly who I am, what difference I'm making in the world, and I want to do that in a community of people. And in many ways, the way that we describe this roadmap or purpose plan is building that next identity, purpose, and community. Who are you? Why do you wake up every morning? What difference are you seeking to make in the world? And how are you a part of a greater community that gives that set of identities and purpose meaning? Another way to say that is that you develop your vision, mission, and values in the context of humanistic inquiry. You look at issues in the world that matter, and then you ask the question about, okay, based on your talents and experiences, how could you potentially have real intersection with those issues in your next chapter so that you can drive meaningful impact forward? And you do all of that in the context of a community, and our first community is on screen here, that is equally committed to the same goals, and that has a diversity of lived experiences that helps you to truly both test and then execute on your ideas of what's next. And so, having shared that, let me come back to our three panelists here. And Stephen, Wendy, I want to start with you. Can we have you each talk about maybe the 60-second version of your purpose plans, which are still under development? We're only done with the first of 3 academic quarters. And maybe an aha moment that you've had along the way in the development of that purpose plan. Steve, can we start with you, and then Wendy, and then we'll go opposite order maybe next time?
Sure. Yeah, so for me, the purpose plan was actually really a critical element of the program, and why I was really interested in coming to LSI. And even though the word purpose really resonated with me, is to really understand what my purpose as an individual in society is. And I think one of the really nice things about the LSI program is, one of the pillars of knowing yourself has really helped bring that out, and have been able to explore that in many different settings as part of the program. But specifically, as it relates to my purpose plan, as I mentioned before, I have this interest in youth employment, and I'm exploring a continuum of where I can plug into helping address some unmet needs as it relates to youth employment. And it could be something along the lines of joining a workforce development board or a similar organization to really provide advisory and consultation to that, to all the way over, as I think about it, to the right, where maybe buy a company or invest in a company whose mission includes employing youth. I think where I'm centering more is in the area of working with or creating a not-for-profit that is focused on work preparedness for the youth, and then also very specifically job preparedness for employers, and really getting it so that employers see a win-win. They're doing something positive for the community, but they're also creating social capital for youth and getting something positive out of the talent that they're able to employ. So that's where I'm really focused. And I wouldn't say that there's been an aha moment. It's really been an evolution, working with a small working group, working with a broader cohort, talking to practitioners and academics in the space to help me really narrow down onto what I perceive and what I'm hearing from others is the unmet need, and then specifically then thinking about how I can be able to offer my skills and experience to help potentially address that in some small or large way. So it's been a really great journey so far, and really looking to expanding that over the next 2 quarters.
Thanks, Steve. And Wendy, do you want to share where you are in your purpose plan development?
Yeah, so I want to just start by linking back to what Seth said. When I stepped down from my role as CEO of United Way Metropolitan Chicago, I didn't really think about it. I think I still don't think about it as retirement. It's sort of a continuum to the way I think Seth described it well, which is I knew I wanted to play a next role, have a next chapter, next leadership role, but didn't know what I wanted that to be. So as I said, I've been in this sort of portfolio mode, trying different things. And I think the purpose plan has also been a big feature for me to work through LSI to clarify that. And I think coming in, what it was the challenge was really having such a broad background, having spent so much time in a particular leadership role with an organization. I really needed to kind of step back and step out of that. And it's been the question of how do I want to take my leadership role forward and to a different level, a next level. And I think some of the things that I've learned are that for me, the real love is designing impact and leading impact. And so while I had a lot of work in my previous role at United Way that was changing a business model of an organization in many different ways and doing a lot of what I'll call kind of like retail fundraising, I've discovered I don't want to continue to do that. I really want to focus in an outsized way on designing and generating impact. And so I've kind of developed 3 pathways that I'm thinking about for my purpose plan. And one is that I would potentially lead a foundation that is in a very generative phase of figuring out how it wants to design its impact, or potentially step into a role that's more of a chief content officer for a nonprofit or an impact organization. And then the third is to lead a kind of like impact incubator organization that could be at a university, could be part of a foundation effort, could be part of a think tank. And all 3 of those pathways actually would be very good fits with different experiences in my background. My next step is actually going to be to kind of go through those different pathways and try them on for size with my mentor later this week. And she's the former head of the MacArthur Foundation. So that's going to be an amazing experience. And I may have some aha moments in that discussion. But I did have a couple of ahas that I would like to share because it might be interesting for all of you. So one was also in honing in on issues. I have a very, very broad background in nonprofit from United Way, from Aspen Institute. But I have been getting very involved in violence reduction work here in the city of Chicago. And I sort of I came into LSI with a hypothesis that that's probably the issue I want to work on, but have been sort of trying to get 100% certain with it. And there was a comment that David Brooks made actually in an offhanded way at a dinner that we had with him recently as a cohort. And he said his advice in in choosing an issue would be to really focus on would be an issue that is big. You know, make no small plans, choose a big issue, one that keeps you up at night, and one that you feel like you've been walking toward your whole life. And when I heard him say that, I said, you know what, this is the issue for me. And so that was good to sort of get a level of even greater certainty about that. And then my second aha moment, actually, I have to attribute to Seth. He and I had a walking meeting recently, and he sort of planted the seed that I've now picked up as a pathway to think about actually an impact incubator. And that could be a great fit. So those are my 2 ahas so far. Thank you, Seth.
Wonderful. I'm very honored to be part of your ahas among the incredible people that are in our universe here. Diana, you have seen 20 fellows developing their purpose plans, and I'm curious if you could just maybe round us out. So Steve describes, really jumping into this area that he's been curious about and kind of putting out 2 hypotheses that he's testing that are across a spectrum of possibility, from owning a company with his financial background and having that employ youth to this nonprofit. Wendy describes 3 pathways. Can you just talk a little bit more broadly about the different types of pathways that people are developing as they look to their future? And then we'll come back to the actual learning journey that gets us here for everyone else. Go for it, Diana.
Yeah, and thank you again. So I'll start even a little bit further upstream, I think, in terms of what we're learning from this inaugural class and some of the variation within this group of leaders. So the way I think about it is what I see as really unifying this cohort is that each person is in some form of inflection point in their lives and are looking to make a meaningful and intentional change. And secondarily, they're all deeply motivated by the opportunity to live and lead purposefully for society in this next chapter of their lives. Beyond that, each of the 20 really are so unique and distinct. And I do think that's part of the power and the magic of an experience like this that you're going through, as we've alluded to, with a group of peers who are grappling with very similar questions, concerned about similar issues, wanting to reconnect really with a sense of passion and meaning and enrichment at this stage of their lives, but are doing it all from a very, very large variety of different vantage points and, kind of approaches and methods. But in terms of purpose plan development, I think of the group, I think of the kind of bookends of the continuum of the group in 2 ways. The first is, kind of what you're hearing from Steve and Wendy. A good amount of our fellows did come in with quite a bit of clay in their process already, that they had begun their journeys and were starting to experiment with different impact-oriented roles, issues that they were passionate about, and really wanted to use their time in fellowship to put, to use Wendy's language, their hypotheses through their paces, to refine and to meet people who could help really enhance their vision for where they might be best footed to contribute and to get involved and to move the needle on these issues. But they were coming in already with a lot of things percolating. On the other end of the continuum, we have a not insignificant number of fellows in this group who are extremely motivated and concerned about different societal issues. But rather than having a sort of already curated set of ideas that they wanted to play with, they're at the very top of the funnel and are a little bit more like, I've got 100 ideas and it's so many things that I feel like I could do. And I really want to use this experience to wander with intent and be receptive and kind of open myself up to the possibility that I might have not considered an idea or yet, like to kind of let myself be inspired by this environment, welcome the aha moments, and really use this as a space, less so for fully defining my actions, but being very intentional about my discernment and my process of intellectual discovery and receptiveness to an experience like this. And so I think what we're seeing as people are going through this, we've got kind of some of the group that are going at this process of discerning their purposefulness from the outside in, where they know that getting involved in these issues really is going to contribute to that deeper sense of meaning and connectivity in their lives. And then we have others who are kind of thinking about it from the inside out and really are starting with deep introspection, slowing down, really thinking about how to invest in themselves and using that as the catalyst for really building out where they could be most impactful as leaders at this next stage. So it's been an extraordinary, mix and exciting to see folks kind of orbit around those different spheres, but there's really everything in between, and watching them work together through this has been just the biggest gift.
Well, thank you. We're going to come back to each of you for comments momentarily, but I now want to lead you into the learning journey that brings Steve and Wendy to their purpose plans. And then we're going to hear about their experiences in that journey and Diana's thoughts as director of that journey. So we have a 3-part learning journey at the University of Chicago for fellows. And as Steve already mentioned, the first part is know oneself. And we'll talk about how we approach that with the university's signature commitment to the liberal arts and to humanistic inquiry. The second part is understand the world. And we're very proud to have more Nobel Prizes affiliated with this university than any other. And that is because we deeply understand the world, and we do so without regard for just mainstream thinking. We are very big on looking rigorously, investigating ideas, and coming to sometimes unconventional viewpoints based on where the data shows us there may be ways of looking at the world. And then the biggest goal is that those come together when you know yourself and you think about what those values that are driving you, and you see the issues in the world that you could be a part of, to bring those together and say, okay, here are the specific applications of how my talents can really give value to me in this next stage, wake me up every day with purpose, and can really contribute to really important issues that could address some of the root causes of challenging social topics. So that is the learning journey. And put another way, that is literally the overall framework for the cohort-based curriculum in LSI. The first course you take each quarter gives you frameworks for reflection. So those are ways of looking at your story in practical terms, and ways of looking at philosophy that could inform who you are, why you exist, and as David Brooks sometimes says, you know, what you would want on your obituary. And often that's very different than just what your career ambitions may have been. Part 2 is really looking at the big issues in the world. And this is a very special approach where you look through different lenses. So the university believes that the best answers come from multidisciplinary thinking. So what we try to do is actually first give you some fluency in different ways of looking at issues as a sociologist, as an economist, as a policymaker. And then within each of those different lenses, we look at the same topic, but often they have very contrasting visions. So how does an economist look at crime, for example? That may look very different, and you might hear from some of our Nobel winners, than, for example, someone who just won the MacArthur Genius Award here, who's a sociologist, Jonathan Rubin Miller, who may look at those topics very differently. And indeed, as you might expect, very U Chicago, there are very strong contestations between some of these faculty about what solutions look like, where one person may see prosecution as necessary to bring down crime, and another may look from a sociological perspective and believe that sometimes that leads actually to recidivism and creates a culture in which these things get worse, even if the metrics may look better in an immediate sense. And those are the types of debates that are facilitated here. We're a big believer at this university that we do not have points of view as an institution, that we are instead the sponsor of critics, and we create a world in which you can hear all different perspectives and come to your own way of viewing these issues and deciding for yourself what you believe to be the key causes that are leading to these societal challenges. Then the third piece is really discerning your purpose, and that is having those concrete actions for an impactful next chapter. Now, I'll just preview that in each of these, we have an advisor who's helping you to really develop your thinking, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Just to give you a sense of what this looks like in terms of the actual curriculum, and for people that attend the information session, we'll actually share with you the curriculum from this autumn so that you can see the actual syllabi that individuals who are part of these courses are going through. The first course on leadership and purpose is a mix between someone at Booth who does a lot with executives around reflecting on their purpose, and a classicist who actually looks at world wisdom literature. So what is Marcus Aurelius and what is the Buddha? And how do you look at all these different traditions of how leadership applies? And they've actually developed this course together. So they've actually sat together, a classicist and a business school professor, kind of thinking about what does leadership mean? And how do we look at it across time and space? And how do we think about it in really unique ways? Same is true in that second course, where we have a Booth professor looking at perspectives on capitalism with a lot of his peers at the school, and then a sociologist who's very critical, who's bringing another way to look at these issues, not necessarily from the perspective of how do you get the biggest pie or how do you create the greatest growth, but how do you look at this from a human perspective? What are the consequences? How does this bifurcation maybe lead to greater pie, but actually create all of these really big challenges from an equity or other standpoint? And they contrast each other in ways where the cohort, and I'll maybe allow Steve and Wendy, have had really important debates about these issues, and they've been exposed to lots of new perspectives that have made them more ready to enter this world because now they're able to sit with many different ways of understanding these topics. Finally, we have two people that are at the forefront of social impact, one in impact investing, who's a professor at Booth and also involved in her own impact investment firm, and then a second who's the executive vice president of the Obama Foundation and leads a community-informed change where he's really looking within communities at how individuals can be involved in grassroots efforts. Alongside that core curriculum, there are then audited courses. So you get to pick two courses from anywhere in the university where it aligns with your interests, and people are able to look typically at that societal issue they want to focus on in their purpose plan. There are also immersion days. So every quarter, we bring together not just the fellows, but a broader community to look at a major societal topic. So in the fall, we looked at democracy and disinformation. And we not only had the fellows, we had journalists from around the world join that, as well as policymakers. And it's a chance for the fellows to actually be part of an ecosystem that is addressing that issue. In the winter, we'll be looking at AI in society. And then in the spring, we'll be looking at sustainable urbanism. And so across those immersion days, we try to jump into the big topics that are reshaping our world. There's travel studies. So in the spring, there's a trip to London this year, and next year, when you all may be candidates for the fellowship, it'll be in Paris. And you look at an issue that is unique to that place. So for example, when we go to Paris next year with the cohort that will be selected over the next few months, we'll actually be looking directly at the topic of longevity, because as you may know, Paris is one of the leaders in the world in terms of life expectancy. It has not been an easy issue for them to deal with politically of late, but it is one that nevertheless is a good problem to have and one that we can learn a lot from. And then finally, there is a seminar. We have a longstanding partnership as a university and a lot in common with the Aspen Institute. And they have a really excellent seminar for executives looking at leadership, purpose, and values. And rather than recreate the wheel, we decided when we were building LSI, we wanted to incorporate the best alongside what the university has. And they've been incredible partners. And so you go through a seminar with them as part of the experience. The curriculum is really meant to be the spark for your purpose plan. But then what we try to do is have an advisor that can really help you fill in each of the different pieces. So for that first piece, which is your life, your values, and your purpose, we have an executive coach, really helping you to distill what motivates you and to think back across your experiences and where you thrive. The academic advisor helps you dig in deeply to that societal topic that you want to focus on for your next chapter. And then the mentor is someone who's about 5 to 10 years into their encore chapter. So they finish their longstanding career, and they're now in that next chapter, and they have the trials of lessons learned, and they're going to be helping you to think about, as you develop your actual specific goals, what's realistic and how do you get there in a way that is going to bring you the greatest joy and impact. And that all leads back to the purpose plan we talked about earlier. And so with that, let me just mention that this is not only for you. Obviously, if you are developing the next chapter and you are in a place where you have a partner or a spouse, you may want to be on this journey with them because you may be designing your next chapters in concert with one another. And so there is an opportunity for people who want their partner to be involved in all of this programming to have them included in everything except that they do not have to develop the purpose plan and they do not receive the personalized involvement of next chapter advisors. I'll also mention that in some cases, there may be two people that both have very eminent careers and may both qualify for the selection criteria. And we also have in this current cohort, a couple who decided to each apply for the fellowship. We were able to consider them each, but with an acknowledgement that they were, a couple at the same time. So let me stop sharing there, and I'm going to come back now to our panelists. And Steve and Wendy, let me start with both of you. I went through a lot of information about the experience, and maybe I'll make this power round because I know we want to get to Q&A. But can each of you just give the kind of short answer, starting with what was it like to be back in class? It had been, I think, about 40 years for you, Stephen, since you touched the University of Chicago, and a little less time, Wendy, but a few decades. What is it like to be back in the classroom? And then I'll have a couple of follow-ups afterward. Wendy, do you want to start this time? Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
I've really enjoyed it. I kind of had a feeling that I would. I was a little nervous that it might, I might also feel sort of rusty. But I haven't felt that. It has been very refreshing. I think in the curated classes, let's say, of the LSI core program, it has been amazing to just, I feel like the program is sort of choosing best professors across all these different areas that are super helpful for us in developing the purpose plan. And then in the audited course, it's been a super interesting way to go deeper and pick up strands of the issue which I'm interested in, which is violence reduction and, conflict studies. And so it's been terrific to go outside of LSI into Harris Public Policy Graduate School and be part of that class and interact with those students who are amazing and just see how that class is taught. It's taught, the class that Steve and I actually both audited together was taught by the head of the University of Chicago's crime lab, Jens Ludwig. And it was just really incredible to see the level that that's at and the way he's teaching it. So I've enjoyed it. That's my lightning round.
Any additional reflections on the classroom?
Yeah, and from my perspective, I have to admit, like, I never thought I would actually go back to school. And in fact, my wife, who she got her doctoral degree later in life, I said, like, I'm amazed that you did it. I will never see doing that. But the reality is, I've been a lifelong learner, and to go into the symposium, actually, I mentioned that before, but going to the symposium last year, was able to sit in a couple of classes, and it clicked. I said, actually, this is pretty neat, and I think I really want to do this, and it has been really neat. It's been tremendous learning experience, and not only from the faculty, just outstanding faculty, but particularly in the core classes, there's a lot of discussion. There's a lot of issues that are raised by the faculty, but then the cohort, we get to talk about it. And we've got these varied experiences, as Diana mentioned, wide experiences. And it's really great to get the different perspectives from folks on issues like, what does wealth inequality mean, and what's the implications of it. The other thing I would say is, like, we're Wendy and I are in one class together. I'm in another. I think Wendy, you are as well. Both those classes have actually been really good learning experiences and very relevant to our particular purpose plans. But it's also been great to be in class with younger folks and to get their perspectives. And I was actually fairly nervous going into class with younger folks. How will they, sort of see us in these classes? And they've been incredibly welcoming. The professors have been incredibly welcoming to having us in the class. And again, it's just been a great learning experience working with younger folks in the classes. So all in all, it's been really, really good.
I have one more question now, and then we'll come to all of your questions for Steve and Wendy. Can you just talk about the next chapter advisors? that's something that is totally unique to LSI. It's something that we added because when we heard about some other programs like this, many people said they wanted more guidance and real applied preparation for the next chapters. And I'm curious, how that has worked for each of you. Wendy, can we start again with you? How have those next chapter advisors shaped your thinking?
Yeah, so that was something that was really important to me, and I feel like it's played out that way, where through all of this, you can see all these different sort of intellectual stimulations, experiences you're going through. I really wanted kind of like the practicality of advisors running all the way through, and it's been really helpful. The coach that actually both Steve and I work with, she focuses on a methodology for pivot, which, how do you pivot to a next phase of your career, which was really interesting to me. And I have found her methodology helpful in clarifying, helping me to clarify what's important for me at this stage, what do I want to change, getting certain about certain things, and then translating that into action. I think so. For me, the advisors, I think, it's the nexus where you can take a lot of the stimulation you're getting, a lot of your thinking, and then work on translating it into the action of the purpose plan, the action of what am I going to go do. For me, the mentor too, like I feel extremely privileged, lucky, blessed to have an incredible mentor who I think is going to really help me vet these different ideas that I have, these pathways, add some more pathways, I hope, and then also really connect me to specific opportunities and walk through that together. And so I think that's great. Academic advisor is sort of coming. For me, we haven't yet kind of gone deep there, but we'll be in the next 2 quarters. And I think that's going to be interesting and rewarding too.
Steve, anything to add on that front? Go for it.
Yeah, from my perspective, I mentioned that I've been in had this corporate career, and I'm shifting, transitioning to a career, really focused on societal impact. In some ways they're the same, but in most ways they're actually very, very different. And so the executive coach that Wendy and I have, she is really good in helping you think about pivot, and specifically for me, helping me to be careful not to have limiting, what she says, and I've adopted, is limiting beliefs. It's like, and that's been important for me as I think about the next chapter, is to not just sort of box myself into this corporate view and to think more broadly about what I can bring to it. So that's been incredibly helpful. The distinguished mentor, similar, person who's got a similar background to me, maybe 5 or 6 years ahead of me in terms of making the transition, been incredibly helpful in just sort of hearing my ideas, offering good advice, and making referrals to me, to folks to talk to. And then on the academic advisor side, I came in with having done a lot of research, and so I may not actually focus in on one academic advisor, but I've been talking to a number of academics, and Seth, you've been great in making introductions for me in that regard. And so I may end up with like a sample of different academics who I can touch base with on specific things as it relates to my purpose plan. But that's incredibly important to be able to leverage the the incredible academics of the university as we think about our purpose plan. Because I think the last thing we want to do is have this purpose plan and realize that it wouldn't work, or someone else has tried it, or whatever, and being able to tap into the academic work to help us guide that plan is just really, really important.
Well, I'm going to share my screen one more brief moment, and then we're going to come to the questions that are already populating in the Q&A. And let me just offer that if anyone else has questions, please put them in, or feel free to raise your hands. We are going through a selection process right now, so this is very relevant. We are looking for people that have 2+ decades of senior leadership experience, significant accomplishment. The university is relentless in our commitment to rigorous, free, respectful, open exchange. And so we want people that are willing to take seriously all perspectives. We are an open culture, we like to say, rather than a cancel culture here at the University of Chicago. And we want to be a place where you can think in new ways and you can then go in your unique direction based on your answers. We want people who have a proven commitment to society. I want to say out loud, for many of you who have had your overwhelming career in the private sector, this does not have to show up in any other way than that you have been involved in some regard societally, and you can articulate why you deeply care as you go through the application process in a way that is convincing and compelling to us that you would use this as an opportunity to really apply your talents toward those issues in the world, and then a compelling vision for how participation in LSI in particular matters. There's a three-part process. Part one is very straightforward. You just submit your resume or professional biography. We've heard from the people that are most eminent that they are not looking for an application process at this stage of life. We do need one, but what we want to be able to do before you go through that process is to tell you, yes, you are in the group of people that, based on your resume or professional biography, would be considered very seriously. Once we do that and return to you, we would potentially invite you for a full application. That does require a personal statement or shorter essay questions and references, but we will support you throughout that process of development. And then the final stage is an interview. We should mention that the fellowship has an annual tuition that is consistent with the cost of a year of study at the University of Chicago. In the 2024-25 year, that will be $77,500. That said, we want to emphasize that we offer financial assistance and that we are very focused on a cohort with eminence across every sector and domain area. And we are very aggressive in making sure that this is accessible for everyone, because as Wendy and Steve can tell you, the thing that makes this cohort tick is that people come from all different experiences. And in the current cohort, about 40% are coming from at least some experiences outside of the private sector. So social, public, academia, and other settings. And so we are very focused on making sure that we make this accessible for the people that meet the criteria and are successful in the application process. And with that, let me turn back to our panel, and I'm going to put this first question in the chat to you, Diana. There's a question here from Richard Blah. It would be very helpful for the panel to offer insights on the time commitment required, full-time, part-time, hours per week. Diana, do you just want to kind of give the structure, how it's Monday to Wednesday, those details, and then Wendy and Steve will talk to you about what your actual experience has been from a time commitment perspective.
Absolutely. So, we want to be explicit that unlike, executive MBA style programs or other sort of advanced leadership programs, this is uniquely a significant time commitment and really designed to be an immersion in person. And our thinking behind that, just to offer it, is that as we were going through the due diligence of creating LSI, we, in surveying our target audience and alumni of similar programs out there, we heard so consistently that there's just no substitute for in-person learning as a cohort, and that does really end up being an accelerant to each individual fellow's learning process by being able to be together, really digging in and wrapping their arms around, these issues and this kind of transitional moment as a group. So the time commitment as it's designed, as Seth is mentioning, currently, the LSI core is 3 courses per week, isolated Monday to Wednesday. So LSI programming is exclusively delivered in those first 3 days of the week, with the intent of leaving Thursday and Friday somewhat flexible and giving fellows freedom to, individualize or customize exactly how they prioritize their time on those days. Those 3 core courses represent 9 hours of course time per week, and then, around 2 or 3 hours of reading per course on top of that. You then also, each fellow is auditing, with the exception of a few, 2 additional graduate level courses that are those represent, courses are 3 hours per week. So that's 6 additional hours. So you're up to 15 hours of course time. Those audits do have intensive reading requirements that is typical of a graduate course at the University of Chicago. And so I'll say that, we have designed the time commitment as it is now. But one gift that we have had is this inaugural cohort have really been co-creators with us. They've given us very insightful feedback. And so based on their experiences, we do imagine somewhat modifying and kind of dialing back some of the core time commitment, still to maintain the sort of standard of rigor and intellectual depth that we see as, you know, necessary for this learning journey, but trying to be slightly more strategic about how we invite, you know, fellows into that time commitment. So Wendy and Steve, you might have more to add about that experience.
So just numerically, I'll say we often describe it as, you know, depending on how much you want to do the reading in depth and multiple times, a 20 to 30 hour a week commitment during the 30 weeks of the academic year. That I think is the other surprise, is that our academic year is 30 weeks compared to the 52 that are in the calendar. And so that sometimes is meaningful to people as they think about this. Wendy and then Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are good descriptions. I think I guess I would say two things. There's a lot, right? There's a lot, but it is flexible, right? So I'm sure all of you have had a lot of different, still do significant roles. Sometimes they're not always flexible. When you've got flexibility in there, it is very different, right? So the fact that things are Monday to Wednesday, you have a lot of time to do to sort this how you want to sort it. So for example, as I've been going through this, I'm also working on a lot of other projects, right? So there's a lot in the mix, but you can keep a lot in the mix. I would also say that, you know, what you're hearing, I think by design, and for me, it's been great by design. Part of the beauty of this program is there's a lot in the mix. And I feel like that's how we want it. You want a lot in the mix because you want to learn a lot, you want to explore a lot. And somehow by having a lot in the mix, I also think it helps you, the constant stimulation of all these different things helps you figure out your path. That said, so that's what you want. That said, you have to be a really good editor. And I think that people in the program, should have enough experience. You should all have enough experience at this stage of the game in your careers and in your leadership roles, where you have to be a really good editor of knowing what are the real things that I really want to spend time on significantly to move my dial, whether it's my purpose plan or my work with the coach or out there networking. And you've got to have a good sense of how you also want to sequence things. And so I would say those are the helpful ways that I've been navigating. But I think the fact that I only audited one class. So I had a total of 4 classes. And for me, that was good. I would say that was the right amount.
Steve, anything to add?
And from my perspective, I think having the being on campus, in person, the 3 days, Monday through Wednesday, is really critical to the program. I view it as an accelerator. It's allowed us to get to know our cohort members that much more. It's get to know Seth and Diana and Shannon and Sarah that much more, get to know the professors more. Just being on campus, you're able to have like coffee or breakfast with professors. So I think that's really a critical element and very, very positive. From my perspective, also having it Monday through Wednesday allows me, I live in the Raleigh-Durham area, so occasionally I'll go home. So it gives me the flexibility to do that, but it also gives me Thursday and Friday to network with different folks in either the Chicago area or in the Raleigh-Durham area. So I think it's a really nice mix. I would say that, Seth, if you're going to send around the syllabi, like, it will be overwhelming when people see it. So just be prepared, but it's actually not as bad as it looks. And you know, as Wendy, I think, put it really nicely, you can edit it, you can sort of get to the critical text that you want to focus on. Nice thing about the audit classes is it is auditing. You're not writing the papers, you're not taking any tests. Actually, there's none of that in any of the LSI core classes as well, but the auditing classes. So you really should do the reading to be able to participate, but you're able to do it in a manageable way.
Well, so there's another question here from Mario Bravo on the different next chapter advisors, and I'll just briefly answer so we can get to the question after, that there is an executive coach that is someone who is skilled in helping people to really develop their next chapter, and they are professionals. That is then paired with the academic advisor who's, sometimes a Nobel Prize winner here at the University of Chicago, is looking deeply at the societal issue. And then with a mentor, the mentor is someone who's just lived this experience. So they're not an expert in coaching, but they just literally have themselves gone through this transformation, typically 5 to 10 years prior. They've learned some lessons, and so they advise you from their human experience. And so those three are complementary in the know oneself, understand the world, envision the future pieces of the curriculum, and each feed into your purpose plan and almost build what you could consider to be a purpose plan committee as you look to the finish line. That is your, parallel maybe to the dissertation committee, should you be doing your PhD. I'm going to come now to the next question here, but as I do, Diana, go for it.
Oh, I just want to quickly add to that. And the question is, how also do we make those matches, just mechanically to share? In the summer, prior to beginning the fellowship, we asked each fellow to complete a survey. We call it a baselining survey, to provide some data points both about where they are in their particular transition, kind of what their stage looks like, and also gather some preferences around what they might most like to focus on, or kind of where their imagination is going in terms of where they see this next stage. And we use that qualitative data, to try and place them with coaches and mentors who are best aligned with their unique goals and objectives for the fellowship. So that's how we go about it.
Final question in here is from Pamela Narens, and it's about whether we can reinforce an idea that came out in your comments, Wendy, that we're not necessarily talking about what comes after retirement per se, but really how senior leaders think about defining the contours of what's next. And I'm so grateful for this question, because we don't use the term retirement if we're being intentional at LSI. So apologies if I missed our own intention. Because we don't see that as the right way to think about the new structure of adulthood. We see it as a completion typically of a long-standing career, meaning that you've been in one domain area for a very long period of time, and you're coming to a really meaningful inflection point. But the whole point of LSI is that we are actually contesting whether or not that point is just retirement, or whether it is actually an opportunity for you to think about, how do I apply these talents that I've developed over time with a new set of learning and energy to really deal with an issue that I care about in the world. And so, Wendy and Steve, any comments on that and on how the cohort has thought about it? Because I do want to say, and maybe you can talk about just what it's like to be part of a cohort community, and in 60 seconds or less, no less, because we're coming up to time, because we do have a very broad range of people from their late 40s to mid 70s. And people are in all different, and that's not even to say where they are in their ages and stages, because it's obviously different based on each individual and what they're trying to achieve. But let me turn that complex and somewhat fragmented question I've created over to each of you.
Sure.
I mean,
Go ahead.
The only thing I would add, because I sort of spoke about it this way, and I think you just explained it well, Seth, is in working with my coach, she talked a lot about the issue, if you've worked in a space for a long time, whatever it is, a particular organization as I had, or in a role, you kind of get tunnel vision. And so then you end that phase for whatever reason, you want to have another phase, and you want to think outside of the tunnel vision. And that's very difficult. And that to me is exactly what LSI is about in the impact space. And that's very different than any kind of idea of retirement. It's really going on to your next phase and saying, how do I keep contributing? And what's a next leadership role, or what's a role, or, it's just looking at all of that and having some help to take blinders off, is how I would say.
Steve,
And the cohort is so important for that. Just quickly, I'll just say that it's, if you believe like I do that great things happen with talented teams, that's exactly what the cohort is. It's the magic that Diana referred to, where you fill each other's gaps, you share insight, people help you get out of your stuff, they share approaches. Steve and I are sharing all kinds of stuff back and forth. It's super helpful and supportive. You do this with a team.
Yeah, and we haven't touched too much on it, but there are subgroups, so working groups that are built in, and Diana, you've created that. I'm during the summer before we actually get into the program. So that's been incredibly helpful because you're able to go into depth with a handful of individuals. But then we also have weekly luncheons with the full cohort. And again, sharing ideas very, very broadly and sharing our purpose plans and getting feedback on our purpose plans. But just the broad camaraderie and support of that has been incredibly important as well.
Well, let me just end this with a huge thank you. We pride ourselves on being on time at the Leadership and Society Initiative, so we will close here. But please know we see information sessions as the beginning of conversations. Our team will follow up. You'll get more information. And please know that if you want to talk further with any of us, I know the fellows have been incredibly generous with prospective candidates. And we as a team are also fully available. And so you'll see that as a follow-up opportunity. Thank you all so much for joining us and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Oh.
Thank you.